Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode. My name is Hans
I'm Edward.
and we are your hosts for now and forevermore. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing microtransactions and DLC, but not for conventional digital mediums. We're going to specifically be covering why they're a bad idea for tangible goods. Isn't that right, Edward?
DLC where they don't belong, essentially.
So it's a bit of a strange terminology. It doesn't quite fit because how do you have DLC for something tangible? Now, I suppose one could argue that, a console is a tangible device, and yet we download DLC for the games. But in that sense, a game is a digital medium.
Yeah.
So I think perhaps what might be best for us, Eddie Boy, is to talk about what microtransactions and DLC are, where they kind of came from, how they've evolved, and why we seem to be headed, or at least some people want to push us into a future where we will need to have subscriptions for tangible goods, which some could argue already exists, but we will get into the finer minutiae of why we believe it is a bad idea in this episode.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that age-old argument that we had 10 years ago when we started arguing about digital stuff, and we even spoke about this a few episodes ago, where why going all digital is bad,
Or why it's really good. Because remember, I'm very much in favor of the all digital lifestyle.
No, I am as well. I just mean that original argument. So
well, look, let's in terms of original now, right? Let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack a little bit. So I want to ask you, what is your before we do that, let's talk about microtransactions and DLC. So for those who may be unaware, a microtransaction, or MTX as it is more commonly referred to, is whereby you have a game or a piece of software, digital, whatever it may be, and in this piece of software, you can pay additional money to unlock certain things. Whether that is a new outfit for a character in Apex Legends, or maybe a new gun in Call of Duty. Essentially, microtransactions are there to help generate additional revenue for video games, and that's technically where the whole thing of MTX is actually originates from. However, microtransactions really only started after downloadable content became mainstream. Now, what's interesting about downloadable content is that it's different to microtransactions. In this sense, a form of DLC would be, let's say, Halo 2 comes out, right? And you have the full game on whatever disc it was available on, and you play the whole game. Then 3 to 6 months later, Bungie, who was the developer at the time, decides, okay, well, here's a whole new addition to the campaign. You pay $5 or $10 for it, then you download that to your console that you're playing on, and there we go. You now have extra downloadable content.
Yeah.
Now, what is interesting about the DLC is that back in the day, DLC was legitimately DLC. It was, always an enhancement to a game. Later on, as people realized that you could actually start splitting up that DLC into micro DLC, we then started with microtransactions. So the big difference between the two is, generally speaking, a piece of DLC is generally much larger. It's normally like an expansion pack to a game or something to that effect, whereas MTXs or microtransactions are a lot smaller in scale. It's like a skin for a gun, a skin for a character, gems to buy extra things in the game, whatever the case may be. So now that we've given a bit of a groundwork of what these terminologies refer to, Edward, I would like to ask you, what is your earliest memory of DLC and MTX?
I think for both you and I, it would probably be something along the lines of the horse armor for Oblivion.
I'm actually so glad you brought that up. So I do want to eventually get to that, okay? But what is your earliest non-controversial memory? So a memory that is personal to you. So not really how, people picked up on it and then discourse began around these two topics. So more along the lines of you as a gamer, and you fondly remember that there was this game, and it's the first time that you can remember that you could download something for it.
My first experience with DLC, I guess, would be from Mass Effect 2, where...
Okay.
No, sorry, Mass Effect 1. Pinnacle Station was 1. So basically, you had the Mass Effect game, and then all of a sudden BioWare had... They used to have an official forum, and on the forum you had points. And to get points, you could spend real-life money, and then you had to use those points to buy DLC for the game, which was Pinnacle Station.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
that's very interesting, actually.
That was my first proper experience with DLC.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. So for me, maybe it speaks to my age. I'm still part of the generation where DLC was physical. So I'm talking about pure expansion packs. Which I still consider as DLC. Because bear in mind, an expansion pack and DLC, in my opinion, are one and the same. Just one is purely digital, whereas previously they used to be physical.
Yeah.
So I mean, now I'm going purely on my timeline. It's quite possible that this was even earlier than this, right? For me, it was The Sims. Because I distinctly remember how...
I mean, yeah.
the original game came out, and then there were what are technically expansions. It was your Sims can now do this, your Sims can now do that. And then it was you buy this for extra elements and stuff. And, if you think about that today, now bear in mind, I'm talking about this in the, I stand to be corrected, but I think The Sims was early 2000s, or was it late 90s?
No, it was 2000s.
Was it early, okay, so I've been a gamer for a very, very long time. But that for me was one of the clearest examples of expansion packs, which is what we consider DLC today. There were more examples, like I remember the original Xbox console with the original Halo had a built-in hard drive. So, it was possible at that time in the early 2000s to connect to Xbox Live and download extra things as well. Now, with all of that said, and having given my personal example, and you've given your personal example, I'm actually aware that one of the first pieces of DLC, and now I'm not talking about a physical disc like I was mentioning with The Sims, but more in line with what you were talking about, actually occurred in 1997, whereby there was this title. I had it written down, but unfortunately the name has literally just slipped my mind at the moment. It was called Total Annihilation, and it allowed. What happened is the developer at the time would actually create new content, just like a little unit here and a little unit there, and for months afterwards, players who were internet connected could download these things for free.
That's cool.
And so, a lot of the history behind DLC and MTXs is in many respects attributed to Total Annihilation, which I think is very, very interesting. Granted, my understanding is that developers didn't charge for it at the time, but evidently, they started with something that was novel and benevolent. And of course, when the true capitalists saw the opportunities behind this, that's when it became a money-making scheme, and we can all thank EA for that. Because interestingly enough, Edward's game is EA game. The Sims is an EA game.
That's exactly. Funnily enough, though, the DLC thing from Mass Effect, my first microtransaction, my first I would say negative experience with MTXs came from MapleStory, where because like all MMOs, you get microtransactions in the game. Now this was also early 2000s.
Thank you for bringing that up. Just before you continue, World of Warcraft was also one of the first.
It was also one of the first. Yes. But that's the first time that I realized how scummy they could be. So buying
why would
DLC,
this your experience? What happened?
Usually, in buying Pinnacle Station, that was mine to keep. At least the license was. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
But I got my allowance money, and I asked my dad to load it onto the game for me. So I got a bunch of, I forgot what the premium currency was called, Nexon points or whatever. And I bought a pet in the game from the premium store. It had an expiration date.
No.
Every single microtransaction in MapleStory has a 30-day expiration date. Or had,
Why?
at least. I can't speak to now.
What is the point?
So you have to...
other than to make money.
Exactly. So that means every second month I had to use some of my points to buy a revival kit or whatever to revive my pets I could keep going.
Hold on here. Are you possibly describing one of the first in-game subscriptions?
It wasn't a subscription. It was all as I wanted it to have. So
yes,
I wasn't subscribed
think about
to anything.
that. But think about that for a second.
In a way, it was
every time you had to revive it, it was like a sub every 30 days.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that is shocking to me, because I mean, how many years ago is this? Is this early 2000s?
Yeah, very early 2000s.
So in my 20 years ago.
Yeah, now, yes.
Wow.
I wanted to say no, but I...
Okay, so what's interesting about this, and what Edward brought up earlier, so after everything we've spoken about now, one of the primary points in time where microtransactions really came to the forefront of everyone's minds and the topic of media discussion was when we had the horse DLC in Skyrim. Was it Skyrim?
It was Oblivion.
Oblivion, whereby people could buy this beautiful horse armor, and I think it was $5 at the time, or just $10 or something.
No, it was $5.
But people were just like, that's ridiculous. Why on earth would I want to pay $5 for horse armor? Well, ladies and gentlemen, 20 years later, every single game has DLC of some kind and microtransactions, where basically we even have games that are built off it completely. And Fortnite is one of those games where they release so much new content that all of their billions of dollars that are generated monthly pretty much comes from microtransactions.
I will say this
not even
much.
DLC, just microtransactions.
At least in recent years, since the whole horse armor controversy, developers have, in a way, become better at executing the DLC or the microtransactions in a way that you don't buy for extra stuff anymore. You buy for cosmetics, and you buy if you buy extra stuff, it's usually a lot more than just a piece of armor, you know? So at least that's become better, I guess.
Well, I don't know about better. It's just more along the lines of it's become the norm.
I guess.
And, you know, what is interesting about that is how those original DLCs, and then eventually, so not even DLC, it's MTXs, right? Because it started off as expansion packs. Expansion packs became DLC. DLC was then broken down even further into MTXs, because as you can tell, what better way to milk the public than to break down the content into smaller bits and pieces instead of having one massive piece that they can just buy and download. And what is interesting about that is mobile gaming. So why it's interesting is because it's almost as if people who created mobile games just took MTXs and decided to build all their games around it.
Yeah, basically.
And that's why you get like 90% of freemium games that are mobile are just terrible, where you have to literally wait like 5 real world hours to get enough coins to unlock this certain thing, or you can buy the coins and speed it up. You know,
listen, I'm still waiting to do a Wingardium Leviosa in some classroom. Okay, so it's so bad.
It's dirty in my personal opinion. Anyway, so the whole look, Edward and I have previously on this podcast spoken about subscriptions, and we had some interesting thoughts on it. You know, in terms of, did we feel that subscriptions are great in terms of the future and so on and so forth. And I think the consensus between the two of us at the time was that yes, to a certain degree, it is okay to have subscriptions for certain things versus paying for other things outright. And we use Xbox Game Pass and Netflix as great examples of when a subscription is okay and why it's okay and when it works.
Exactly.
All right? Now, the big point of today's discussion is how, as we've mentioned, there was once upon a time where a physical expansion pack became digital DLC.
Exactly.
Well, everyone, today we're at a point where it looks like digital subscriptions are filtering through to physical product. Now, this is a bit of a contentious issue. Now, understandably, we're not specifically talking about commercial licensing. So I understand that from a commercial perspective, if you own, as a business owner, I have a lot of properties that I look after, a lot of businesses, and so I just speak from experience here. So different business owners, depending on what their business is about, can enter into agreements for physical hardware. And in this sense, for example, a brewery will give a tap to a restaurant on a subscription basis for the life of that restaurant. Same goes for coffee machines, sometimes even fridges. Understandably, there are certain aspects within commercial enterprises where entering into an agreement for a subscription for a product makes sense.
But
okay?
Yeah.
Where it doesn't make sense, however, is where you release a fully fledged product with all the bells and whistles, but then you software lock certain aspects of a completed product behind a subscription.
Yeah.
Now, specifically, what we're going to be speaking about today in this regard is BMW and their announcement that they are going to be adding subscriptions to their vehicles to unlock aspects that are already included in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why this is ludicrous, to say the least, is simply because, first of all, you are buying a vehicle, right? You have to buy the vehicle. It's not like you were renting the vehicle from BMW. You're now going into the dealership and you're purchasing it. And it's irrespective of whether or not you're financing it, through a bank or through some other institution, it doesn't matter because a finance is not a subscription. Okay? So ideally, you pay BMW upfront for this vehicle. Now, they want to lock hardware features behind software where you need to pay a monthly subscription to enjoy these features.
Yeah.
And one of the first ones that they've announced has to do with car seat heating.
Yeah.
And sorry, not sorry, that is just the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. Because as we're saying here, there's a big difference between, for example, entering into a subscription agreement for an item that doesn't belong to you now, you're just using it for a singular purpose, versus buying something outright and then being forced into a subscription to unlock the things within the product that you already own to use. That's next level bullshit.
Yeah, like it's a weird thing to be sure, because you think, okay, usually when I buy a car, I'm given options anyway. I'm given options for butt heating and for dims and whatever. But this is, my initial reaction was, oh, it's the same as it always was. It's just locked behind software now. But when I did some more research into it, and it's literally, they already give you everything. It's just not. It's installed and everything. You get all the bells and whistles, but it's locked now. It's essentially the same as buying a game with cut content on the disc.
Yes.
And that's
precisely it. You see, so this is the interesting thing, right? So the automotive industry has always worked in a bit of a, if you want the premium features, you have to pay for them.
Yeah.
And so, like Edward was saying now, generally speaking, let's say you have a vehicle that comes in at 500,000, but now you want to add heated seats. So that's an extra 30,000. But you pay for it, you add it to your initial cost, that's it. Boom. You pay the extra, when your car is delivered, you turn on the seats as much as you like, right? Doesn't matter. Now, however, I'm genuinely curious how they're going to price this, because it has always been known that extras always cost money. So now, as Edward has said, this car comes with full bells and whistles. So what is the price then? Is it the price of the vehicle with all the bells and whistles? Or have they reduced the price and are now selling it at a loss and then trying to recoup the costs in subscriptions?
See, and we don't know. That's
We
the
don't
thing.
know yet, but I have the feeling there is no way
It's
they're
gonna be
going
the
to they're going to sell the car with everything in it at a
Yep.
reduced cost and hoping to make it up in subscriptions, because everybody knows someone out there is going to develop a little chip that you plug in and it's going to unlock every feature in the car.
I want to say it reminds me of when I had to take my PlayStation 1 and 2 to the flea market to get that chip installed.
But like, you just so think about it like this as well as another example, right? Imagine going into a store, buying a PlayStation 5 or buying an Xbox Series X. Okay, now you buy it, you pay for it outright. You bring it home, you start it up, and then it's like, oh, by the way, you need to pay $5 a month to access the hard drive to install games.
Or rather, you need to pay $5 a month to be able to view UHD Blu-rays.
Yes, that's another example. Yes, because obviously both of these devices that we've spoken about have Blu-ray drives. But yes, but essentially what Edward is saying here is 100%. The hardware you've purchased exists, but they're software locking certain elements and then hiding it behind a subscription.
Mm-hmm.
No, y'all. This is bad news. And
Bad.
what's even scarier about this is that I see that there are other car manufacturers like Mercedes-Benz that are like, oh, that's a great idea. We're going to also try it out and see how it works. Now, honestly, sorry, not sorry, but if you're foolish enough to purchase a vehicle and then subscribe to features that are already in the car that you've probably already paid for, then you're really just a sucker for punishment.
Yeah.
Because that makes zero sense. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I would rather they be like, okay, the base of the car is 500,000, but all of your extras cost 300,000. So we're going to take the 300,000 and then put it over a subscription for 5 years, right? But not a subscription, just a payment plan. But then
Pretty
again,
much.
why even bother doing that? Just add it to your cost and just, do it all up front and then just add that to your premiums every month instead of now having it doesn't make sense. Because cars are cars are expensive. So now you have your car premium and then you're adding subscriptions onto your already expensive premium.
See, but this is where it gets even more scummy now, because now the marketing department can go and they can say, hey, okay, let's offer everyone exactly the same car, but now we add in the ads, you get 2 years free of auto dims and butt heating, when in fact you're paying the same price. And now they're just going to tack that onto your credit card after 2 years.
But can you just imagine things like, please note that your enhanced brake subscription is expiring in 1 week.
Imagine seeing that message.
Yes, but this is the future we are headed towards if people don't curb this now. It seems humorous now. We can laugh about it now. But the start is something small, just like we've seen with DLC and MTXs.
Yep.
It starts really small and then it grows and it becomes this massive beast. And then all of a sudden everyone is doing it. And everyone is like, why did this happen? And this happened because people supported it. So, in this whole, like, we're not against DLC or microtransactions things when they're done appropriately. Often Edward and I, in our work, whether it's through VAMES or social media, whatever, we will call out companies as per our profession as journalists in terms of when things are done badly. And one of the most recent examples of this in terms of the gaming sphere was the recent Gran Turismo.
Yeah.
Where the microtransactions were so egregious that you almost had to pay, I think it was like $120 a car or something ridiculous.
It was bad.
Just to unlock it or something. I mean, I stand to be corrected
just
now.
to be able to unlock it.
Yes, it's just when it's done poorly, developers and manufacturers need to be held to task. So this whole thing now of car manufacturers attempting to already put you into debt for what is a depreciating asset. Let's never forget that, right? The moment you get in the vehicle and you drive it off the parking lot, you have already lost money.
Yeah.
That is how something like a depreciating asset or a commodity for a vehicle works. So why then do you want to, first of all, go into debt buying a brand new vehicle to then just add to your monthly debt with subscriptions for parts of the car that are already there but now are locked behind software?
It's like a tiny balloon payment.
No, you're right. You're right. Like I don't want to advocate for things like piracy and jailbreaking things and that, but honestly speaking, and I don't condone it, and this is not unsolicited advice or anything like that, but honestly speaking, if car manufacturers do this, they deserve to be hacked. Okay. Honestly, this is just awful and seedy behavior and there's nothing more here other than people trying to make more money. That's it. That's all that it is. It's capitalism at its worst.
You know how Ned and Peter Parker in Spider-Man Homecoming, they went to the hotel room and then they found the software suite and everything inside Peter's suit, and then they hacked into it to unlock it. This is what's going to happen with cars now.
I'm telling you, it's going to be a simple USB that you just plug in, and it's just going to run a script, and then all the features in the car are going to be available to you, and you just
pretty much
carry on. Now, I mean, I can imagine there's going to be authentication methods in place and stuff like that. No doubt. I remember back in 2013 when Microsoft caught a lot of flack for their always-on presence for the Xbox One at the time. And then Sony held a very, what they thought was smart at the time, little, skit of this is how you share games on PlayStation. And it was the one executive handing over a game to the other executive, which I could poke a lot of holes in today, given how PlayStation barely supports backwards compatibility, but we're not going to do that. But what is interesting about that, and what is interesting about that original concept, was how angry people became around it. How dare you, lock the software after every 7 days without it syncing to the internet to prove that you have the valid license, And yet here we are, a little less than a decade later, and they're starting to do this for physical products. Now, understand, Microsoft reversed their decision back then. And what is most interesting about that, if people really look into it, is how draconian PlayStation DRM actually is versus Microsoft's current implementation. It's all out there. You can go and read it up, how Sony had exactly the same... Actually, their DRM was even more draconian than what Microsoft had announced. It's just that they saw the backlash of it and decided to reverse course quickly and before announcing anything. It's a very, very, very interesting story, but it is what it is. Anyway, so here we are today, a decade later, and now we have people who are trying to do exactly the same thing, but for for physical hardware. So now you can just imagine, just like with everything that is a subscription or everything where you buy that has a digital license, there needs to be authentication. So therefore, it stands to reason that these vehicles will have some sort of consistent communication with BMW servers, for example. And they will be able to offer software updates and, possibly determine if your car's been cracked, things like that. Now, personally speaking, that I don't want to live in a future like that. I don't want to live in a future where you have to think about jailbreaking your vehicle in order to get the most out of it, because that just opens the doorway to a host of other problems. For example, we already have issues of malicious code and malicious software that are out there. So now you have some unsuspecting Karen in some neighborhood who downloads something onto her USB to unlock her heated seats, and she puts it in, and then her entire car decides to fail while she's in, mid-traffic on the highway.
Yeah.
Because that can actually happen. People are malevolent that way. Now it's easy to say, oh, but that wouldn't happen. But no, the fact of the matter is that even today, some of the newer cars are so... what is the word? Yeah, they're so connected and they're so reliant on their central chips, their CPUs, that they can be easily taken down with the right software and hardware components.
Yep.
That's the scary part about this whole thing. So I know we've bibbed and bobbed now through a lot of different topics, but essentially, we're speaking about why microtransactions and DLC are a terrible idea for tangible goods. And this is why. This is one of the reasons why. And cars are just the latest in a long line of, products that are available to people that are doing things like this. So there is one, for example, that I'm very keen to buy myself.
Of course.
It's called the Aura Ring. It's the Aura Ring. It's a ring that looks at your sleep, your heart rate, your activity levels, and so on and so forth. But I've recently come to learn that the only way the ring actually works is through an Aura Ring subscription. So you can buy the ring and it'll give you very basic functionality, but to really unlock it, you need a subscription for it. And that, for me, it bothers me a little bit because I feel you're already buying this $300, $400 product. Why do I still need a subscription in order to gain all the benefits from it? That doesn't make sense to me. That's like, I mentioned this to Edward the other day, and I was like, imagine Apple doing this. Imagine you buy, or even in Google with the Android operating system. Imagine buying a new phone, and you pay the upfront cost, right? And like iPhones and modern Android phones can be quite expensive, especially the higher tier ones. So you spend your $1,500, $2,000 or whatever the case is on this brand new phone. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, to access the photos album, you need to pay $5 a month.
That's some bullshit.
I mean, or rather, because we were talking about hardware being locked. So maybe it'd be $5 a month to enable the camera. Right? Because the camera's already there. It's already in the device. But this is the precedent that these car companies are trying to set, is that you already have a product with everything in it, but with software locked certain things that you now need to pay for.
Yeah.
You see? This is the danger that Edward and I are trying to get across here. This is the worry. This is the danger.
It's so bad, actually. Like, I guess the question is, where do you draw the line? And immediately it goes with software. You can draw it with software. Yeah. That makes sense. At least in today's day and age, that's how it is.
Well, I mean, it's now, not just software. You draw it at the hardware. Like, if you've included hardware within your product,
yeah, that's what I mean.
Don't sell it with the inability to access
exactly
parts of it. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Like, that's just bad, man. And that's exactly what's happening now with BMW and Mercedes. And I bet everyone else will follow. And Honda's next, Toyota.
This is the thing. If there's not enough public backlash, or now all of a sudden you get people who are like, oh, well, I couldn't have heated seats before because I couldn't afford it, but now I'm going to do it with a subscription. It's a bit like, you're doing the wrong thing here.
Yeah.
And, one of the biggest, what is now one of the biggest EV manufacturers in the world, Tesla, immediately comes to mind. That entire car is software. The entire car. And I am also aware that there are certain parts of Teslas that are locked behind software.
Yeah.
And most notably the self-driving capabilities. So every single Tesla can have self-driving. But as far as I understand it, I do stand to be corrected here, is that the software to unlock it needs to be paid for. But then it's yours. It's not a subscription.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about paying for it again and again and again. Just do one upfront cost, and now your car can do whatever it needs to do. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, I'd love to know what everyone else thinks. What do you think? How do you feel about this? Are these truly dangerous precedents, or are we blowing this seemingly out of the water? Personally, I feel it is a bad precedent to set, because in our subscription discussion that Edward and I previously had, we spoke about how it was seemingly going out of control, where almost everything is a subscription nowadays, right?
Yeah.
If I think about now, specifically in terms of the software that I use, so granted, not all of the software that I subscribe to is necessary. Okay, so like I have Apple One, for example, because I enjoy it. I like the Apple Fitness capabilities. I want the extra storage, but that's my choice. Like, I don't have to subscribe to that for my stuff to work, But, if it did get to a point where, for example, I buy a brand new MacBook Pro and Apple's like, oh, well, just as an example here, it's not that they're doing it, but they're like, oh, well, to enable the FaceTime camera, it'll be $5 a month as part of the FaceTime bundle.
Or,
that's
to get that automatic switching with the pods and stuff.
Yes. There are so many things, if you think about it. Now, if you start breaking it down, that is controlled by software that could be hidden behind subscriptions. And that in itself is not a good thing. There is a fine line here. And for me, as Edward was saying, that line is, if you've created a product, you shouldn't be locking features behind software.
Yeah.
It's tantamount to releasing a video game and then locking levels or parts of content of the game behind paid for content, but it's already on the proverbial disc.
Yeah. It's been developed.
The original download.
And it's done. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so please do send us your thoughts. Let us know what you think. Edward, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's it. I think you
suppose,
pretty much summed it up very succinctly.
No, more than anything else, this is a very, it's not so much a debate really, in my opinion, in terms of whether this is good or bad, because we feel it's bad.
Yeah,
so it's not like we really want to, like, I mean, so those of you who've listened for a long period of time, or maybe you're new, you know, Edward and I like to consider things from a variety of perspectives. We try to be as even and as unbiased as possible for most topics, as much as possible, right? We're human.
Yeah.
We have errors. But this is just a very, I don't know, I feel very strong that this is just not the right thing. It's not right to have a vehicle with all of these capabilities, but now your software locking them behind subscriptions. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me at all. Unless the whole car is a subscription. And it's a cheap one now, right? That's, you know.
So basically, you buy a base car.
But no. You don't even buy the base. It's just a full-on subscription now.
You wouldn't download a car, Hans.
Okay, you see, I don't know. This is such a new thing.
Yeah.
This whole thing of buying a physical product and then having features locked behind software. It's new. It's not something that's everywhere just yet. And the surprising thing for me is, why is the automotive industry the first one to jump on this? If anything, I would have thought maybe mobiles or consoles, you know, where they are like, well, you know, to have this extra feature, you're going to pay this per month. But look, either way, that stuff doesn't work. It shouldn't be that way. I don't want to have to pay extra per month now for an item that I've already paid for. Because then what does that mean? That means that I technically don't own the item or own everything the item can do. So what's the point of owning the item?
Basically, the way I see it is, you know, those subscription boxes that you can subscribe to. Let's say Manscaped. So you subscribe to Manscaped. This is not a sponsor. And in the box, I pay $10 and I get a razor and 3 blades.
Yes.
But now I want to up that subscription. And they don't do this, but let's say they have microtransactions, okay? So I pay $1 extra for an extra blade. Okay. Then they ship that to me. But now with this imagine they ship you everything, a big box with everything. But you have to input a little code to get access to that. And you only get that code when you pay extra.
A code to access the blades every time. Every time you want a new blade, you have to pay for a subscription to unlock the code to get it. Yeah.
So basically, your subscription, your extra subscription now is just an email list full of codes that you have to put in. It's stupid.
Look, the whole thing is a mess. And as I mentioned before, would love for you to let us know what your opinions are. How do you feel about this? Are we just two old grumpy men now? Or do we have a valid worry here of what could be in store for a subscription fueled future? But in the most ludicrous of ways.
Yeah. That's
you know?
Pretty much all our topics.
I can just imagine like an augmented cyberpunk future where you go and you get augments done in your jaw, but then you have to pay a subscription to eat. Because now your jaw you can't function without a sub, even though you paid for the work to be done.
Yeah. Like
that's it. I know that sounds extreme, but that's the future. If we don't be careful now, that's the future we're going to have.
Give it 55 years, then we'll be there.
Anyway, Edward, thank you so much. For those of you who listen, thank you from Edward and myself, and we look forward to seeing you all in another episode. Ciao.
Bye.